How's it going, everyone? KingBlackToof here, and welcome to another terminology video for beginners. So we're going to go through quite a bit of terminology that you'll see in Gwent. I'll put the list up there so you can see what we're going to talk about. So previously we talked about tag terminology, and a lot of this terminology you'll find written in the description of the abilities of certain cards. And by understanding this, you can understand what's going on when cards are placed. And there's a bit of strategy behind what you should be doing when you see these types of things and what's going on just generally when you're playing a game of Gwent. So first, let's talk about resilience. So a unit which is resilient means that it will stay on the board until the next round and lose its resilience then. The resilience only lasts for one round, but it allows that unit to stay on the board until the next round. So you can hopefully keep hold of some strength. Now, usually when at the end of a round, all units will go to their respective graveyards most of the time. A resilient unit which has a bar on it with a fist icon like that, this will stay on the board until the next round. Now, some units have resilience automatically, part of their ability, like the Mahakam Defender here. Part of its ability is to gain resilience. Okay. Now, you can also give resilience and take it away via certain methods. So the main one is Adrenaline Rush, which is a special card, and it toggles resilience. By toggle, it means that if you give it to a card which is not resilient, it will gain resilience. If you give it to a card which already has resilience, it will take it away. Okay, so you can use it offensively as well as defensively. And there are other things you can do as well. If you destroy a unit, it will lose it. If you lock a unit, it will lose it as well. But be aware that things like the Mahakam Defender, you play it in round 1, it will stay on the board to round 2. And then it will lose its resilience. But if you can replay that card, like things like Decoy, for example, its ability allows it to regain the resilience. So next we've got weather immunity. So in Gwent, we have 3 lanes that you can play your units on. You've got the melee, the ranged, and the siege. And each one has associated with it a weather effect. So you've got frost, fog, and rain. Now, weather immunity is immunity to all weather, no matter what row it's on. Okay, so it means that when weather is played, usually units will go down to 1 strength. But if they're weather immune, they'll stay where they are and they're not affected by weather. Now, a lot of monster cards have weather immunity automatically. This can be taken off, again, by using cards like Blizzard Potion, which allows you to toggle weather immunity on or off. And if you lock a card, it will lose its weather immunity as well. So weather immunity is to just not get affected by weather. You can also tell whether a unit is weather immune if it also has a bar on it with a teardrop on it, which gives you an indication that it's immune to weather. So let's talk about locking and unlocking in Gwent. A card which can do this is Dimeritim's Shackles, for example. Other cards can do it as well. Lock or unlock any unit on the battlefield. So if you played any other card game, it's kind of like a silence. It'll stop any abilities from being activated. So when you lock something, locked units lose all tokens and have no ability until replayed or moved to the hand. So when it says lose all tokens, tokens in this sense are things like resilience and weather immunity that we spoke of earlier, the bars with the icons on. These are classed as tokens, so it will lose those when you lock a unit. Okay. Also, it will lose its ability. So if a Vran warrior got locked, normally it would be consuming every 2 turns, but if it's locked, it doesn't do that anymore. So the lock will stay on there until it's either unlocked, moved back to your hand, or replayed. So if you lock something and it goes to the graveyard, it is still locked in the graveyard. But if you resurrect it with a medic and replay it, it will lose the lock. You could also decoy it, pick it up off the board and replay it. It will lose the lock then. Or you could unlock it with another Dimeritim Shackles. Now be aware that if you unlock something, it will gain its ability back. So the Vran warrior will begin consuming every 2 turns again, but it won't gain its tokens back. So things like resilience and weather immunity, when they're locked and removed, unlocking will not gain you them back. Okay, but be aware that if you replay a card, it will lose the lock, and things that gain weather immunity or gain resilience when they play, if you replay that card, it will gain it again and lose the lock. So next, let's talk about base strength. Every unit in Gwent has a strength attached to it, and that's the number in the top left, and this is white. Okay, this is its base strength. This is the strength of that card. Now you can wound it and send it into the red, or you could buff it and send it into the green. But these will get lost when either it's picked up off the board, it's reset in some manner, or it goes to the graveyard. The wounding and the buffing will get lost. And when you bring it back out or replay it, it'll go back to white value, and that's its base strength. Furthermore, you can actually buff via base strength as well as wound via base strength, and this just makes that card weaker and makes the strength on that card inherently weaker, so when it does get replayed, it's a lower value. Now, if a card is weakened so that it has 0 base strength, okay, so say if it's a 2 base strength card like Priscilla, and you minus 2 base strength from it, it'll get banished from the game completely. If it's got 0 strength attached to it, it'll get banished from the game. The base strength is the white value that this card sits at. So next I want to talk about the terminology spawned or spawning. So when a card is spawned, it means it gets created from nowhere. It just gets created. So you didn't actually put this card in your deck, but one of the cards that you had spawned another unit or effect. And there are actually cards which specify other spawn things. So one card is Savage Bear. Now this will deal 1 damage to every card which appears, but it does not affect spawned units. So if you put a card on the board, it will get hurt. But if that card produces something else, that won't actually get hurt because that thing that it produces is a spawned unit. Okay, it gets created from nowhere. The next, let's talk about destroying. So the term destroy means that that card is removed from the board and put into the graveyard, and it doesn't trigger any form of, it's not wounding per se. You're not triggering things like the Axeman, which get buffed every time something is wounded. It's just removed from the board. Usually this is associated with things like Scorch, which just destroy the strongest unit, or Epidemic, which destroys the weakest. Okay, it's not actually a form of wounding. It's just remove that card from the board. There's a couple of terms that players tend to use quite a bit, which are not actually referenced in the game exactly. And one of these is demote. So anytime a card is demoted, it goes from gold to silver or gold to bronze, if that was its original color. But the cards always reference it as convert to silver or convert to bronze. But a little bit of terminology that a lot of people use is demote because it makes feasible sense to do so. So another one of these is agile. If someone says a card is agile, what it means is that it can be played on several different rows. So it's not stuck to being a melee card, it's not stuck to being a ranged card or a siege card. It usually has a swirling arrow to indicate that it can be played on multiple rows. And one of the old terms was agile from The Witcher 3, and this is kind of stuck just a little bit. So another piece of terminology which you'll see as you're browsing through cards is whether unit cards are loyal or disloyal. Okay, now every unit is either loyal or disloyal, or sometimes it can be both. You know, you can get a choice, but basically if it's loyal, it means you play it on your side of the board only. If it's disloyal, you have to play it on the opponent's side of the board, but you'll get some sort of benefit from doing so. Or if it's loyal and disloyal, it means you get a choice of whether you want to play it on your side of the board or the opponent's. So loyal and disloyal just tell you whereabouts on the board you can play it. So next I want to talk about spying units as well as spies. And it's going to get a bit complicated here, but every disloyal unit you play is a spying unit. And you'll know this because it has the eye symbol above it. Okay, this means it's spying for you. It's a spying unit. And there's several benefits to spying units, mainly for Nilfgaard. They get buffs on the amount of spying units that are on the board. Okay. Spies, however, spies are a piece of terminology which a lot of players use, and they're not actually referenced in Gwent the Witcher card game at all. Now, spies is in reference to Witcher 3 Gwent, whereas the only disloyal unit were spy cards. You play them on the opponent's side of the board and you gain card advantage. So if someone says play your spy card, they mean, in Gwent the Witcher card game, a disloyal unit which gains you card advantage. There's only a few. Every faction has at least one. It's things like Prince Stennis for Northern Realms, Yavin, Berna Bran, Donna Kebab, Cantarella, and Avalak. These are disloyal units that gain you card advantage. So while they are spying units is what they're referred to in Gwent, but some players might call them spies because they reference the Witcher 3 classical traditional spies that gain you card advantage. So just a couple of extra pieces of terminology. You've got when removed from the board as opposed to when moved to the graveyard. So the latter, when moved to the graveyard, is pretty obvious, hopefully. When that card's moved to the graveyard, whatever its effect will be, will trigger. So the Berserker will trigger when it's actually in the graveyard, as opposed to when removed from the board. So prize winning cow says when removed from the board, spawn a 9 strength chort. Now removed from the board is as easily as decoy. You pick the card up and it's removed it from the board, and then you place it back down. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the graveyard when you're removing it from the board. Okay, so this allows you extra little bits of strategy where you can just pick a card back up, spawn its effect, then place it back down to get a secondary effect from the prize winning cow, for example. So the next piece of terminology is the transform keyword. It means when a unit transforms, it will change into a new card and you'll lose the original. The Berserker that we spoke of a moment ago is able to do this. When it moves to the graveyard, it will transform into a Berserker Bear. So when it goes to the graveyard, it will transform into a new card and you'll no longer have access to the original Berserker. It's now a new card with new abilities. The last piece of terminology I want to talk about is discarding. This simply is the effect of choosing a card and putting it into your own graveyard. Okay, Skellige have a lot of this. They can choose to discard from their hand. They could choose to discard from their deck. Okay, and it's the act of putting cards into your own graveyard. So that's it for this particular video. I hope you enjoyed this little video on keywords. If you've got any follow-up questions, like maybe I missed one or you weren't quite clear, so you want to just follow up a question, feel free to do that in the comments below. I will answer them the best I can. Until next time, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you again very soon.